Who do I think I am? Well, I want to talk a little bit today about Paul and myself. Paul in the Bible, who was the main theologian who wrote the most of the New Testament. He calls himself the chief of sinners. And, you know, I don't qualify to be a pastor and or an elder or a deacon in the church because you could say I'm a chief of sinners, right? But I don't care about what people think today. And my point is, I have to care some, but I don't care. I care about people's feelings somewhat and all that stuff if it's not a manipulation. But Paul called himself the chief of sinners because he was a murderer. He actually was like a terrorist before he was saved. Now, after he was saved, he admits that the Christian life is a battle between the flesh and spirit your whole life. But today, in today's world, it's like nobody wants to allow anybody to talk unless they've lived a perfect life and had everything done perfect and everything else. Especially, you can't talk about the Bible. You can't have a leadership position anywhere and all kinds of stuff, right? Well, I don't care about that. I'm not trying to have one. I'm just trying to share the fact that I'm a human being who was born. I'm going to die. I've almost died several times. And so far, I'm still here. I've learned from a lot of stuff. And I like to share good things. I want to warn people about heaven and hell and show the evidence of that. And I want to be able to do that. But I've still had struggles with my appetite, my dietary appetites, and sometimes loneliness, depression, because I've had somewhat of a rough life. And so I ended up being single and didn't want to be single. So what's the big deal? Who cares? Who cares? Why do you want to hate on people like that? So, especially ones that don't cause trouble. Something I've not done is ever hurt anybody, never stole from people. Didn't do that. And I'm not, but I believe that there's forgiveness for people who do that. I think there's redemption. Now, for murderers, that's a little different. But stealing from somebody, there's redemption for those things. You can pay them back, first of all. If you're not repeating the crime, then you might be pardoned and forgiven, right? So forgiven and pardoned. So if you're repeating the crime and you get caught in a bunch of them, how can you pay back that many people? Well, who knows? That's a question. But if I were to say I'm the chief of sinners, let's open your Bibles too. And everybody's going to be like, we're not listening to him. We don't want to hear what he has to say. Well, why not? You might not want to crown me as a pastor, and I might not want to be one, or I don't feel I'm called to be one. So you might not want to crown me as having some position, a specific position that you're supposed to live up to these certain things on. But everybody shouldn't have the same standards, by the way. A lot of times we do standards, and standards usually help us. It's standards. If you set certain standards, that helps your goal. A lot of times there's certain standards you should have, but there's certain standards that don't help the other person. They kind of take them off of what their goals are. And it's a good goal that they have. Yours is a good goal too, but theirs is a good goal. But if they have this certain standard, get up at this time every day and eat that, whatever. Well, they might work third shift or second shift, first shift, or they may need to, if they have extra gifts like the desire to speak. It doesn't mean you're the best speaker. You may have a gift for speaking because you want to share. And that's a gift, whether you're a good speaker or not, if you're relating good things. But if you're a writer, a poet, or you have a hobby that you do on the side, you might have to get up real early and do that before you go to work. You might have to do it late. There's different things. People have to have a certain standard they set that helps them accomplish their goals. All right. So everybody's standards aren't supposed to be the same. And so everybody shouldn't have to go to college. I think people shouldn't go to college until they buy a lot of land first. Pay for a lot of land for you to land on in case the money's not working out, you're not getting passing grades, anything else, or you can't get a job from the college degree. I'd go to a trade school. I'd suggest a trade school. I'd suggest saving some money first and going part-time anywhere instead of going into debt. Buy a piece of land first, I would say. If you can, buy a cheap house first. But buy a piece of land you could put a house on. Small land, small piece, or a bigger piece. And there you have it. I say to do that. Stay at your parents' house until, if y'all get along and you're allowed and all that, and they should want you to, if you get along. They should want you to stay there, buy a piece of land, and then think about going to college after that. That's what I think is better, a much better cultural type of plan than what we've had in the past. So, because guess what? There's nothing wrong with owning stuff. First of all, our goal should want people to have private ownership of private property rights, their own place, above a college degree. That should be what we promote in our land, so we have private property rights and we don't rent ourselves out of freedom, right? And we're doing that. We've done that. So anyway, so here I am, the chief of sinners, a person who has, I'm not making fun of it. I've never set out to sin. I'm a person I have a good conscience in a sense because I know I've never set out to go sin. I've always tried to redeem the time, think of other people, think of getting to know the world, getting to know things, knowledge. Some people could say maybe you tried to get to know too much in some places you shouldn't, about some things you shouldn't do because that can bring a temptation or whatever. Well, I have had problems where I've gotten depressed, lonely, and stuff like that, and then I feel like I need a break, and I thought I'll take a break, and I've taken a wrong turn when I've taken a break, but sometimes, and it's not as much as everybody would think it is. But I have gone places, I've gotten robbed and different things and tried to get to know different people. But for the most part, the people I've known and from, what do you call it? What's the word for it? From the successful sides of society, the most successful sides of society, they're not very sociable and they're not very welcoming of me because I don't measure up to the successful side of society. I don't, and so, and they don't believe in doing free stuff like I'm doing right now. So, but I believe in it. I like doing free stuff because I can do a lot more work when I'm doing free stuff, and I can do it what God brings to me, and I can do what I've learned. I can share what I've learned more. I can do more work without having to go take time to sign a pay check or whatever. So I like doing free stuff and just having a simple budget. I like the idea of living humbly and living in a cabin in the woods. That hasn't worked for me yet, but at some point I might do that. So I would like to be a hermit and live in the woods and live humbly so I can write more poetry. And matter of fact, I don't want to be on here talking that much. That's not me. I'm doing it because I think it's somewhat productive. It's people can learn something from it or be confirmed in something they already know and feel like, okay, I'm not as crazy as everybody says I am. And which I don't believe I'm as crazy as everybody says I am for talking about this stuff and trying to do better and teach better, learn better and share better. I don't think that's crazy. And if I get something wrong, somebody can assess that and then they might point it out to me and I'll have to say, okay, are they wrong or am I wrong? And but they might point something out to me I didn't think of. I've liked that. I'm willing to look at it and say, no, I think you're right. I got that wrong. I'm going to look closer at that or look at two angles of it. Then maybe I should focus on this angle more. And then sometimes I'll say, no, I think I got it right. And that's a manipulation you're giving into, not me. A twist of something. And so I like to do that. I'm not somebody who's going to say I'm 100%. I don't have 100% knowledge of everything. So, but I'm forgetting a couple of things. I'm kind of talking not on one subject here, but let me hit pause. Well, I just want to close this out by saying everybody should, if you believe in Jesus, first of all, I haven't brought that up in this video, but if you believe in Jesus, you should want to share with people some things or to be able to help people in some way. And sometimes we do things so backwards, like the college thing, instead of buying property first. This is an organizational thing, a very big thing that can help our country a lot. Just that one little point that I brought up here. Almost everybody has their children buy land before they go to college. That could really change our country and success in the future, right? As a country. Anyway, but that's a huge thing. And anyway, I was trying to finish my statement before 10 minutes, but it will be a little longer, not too much. But everybody should, there's a verse, Romans 10, 9 and 10. Is that the right one? Anyway, right reference. But that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in thine heart that God has raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. And then the next verses talk about for confession. But it talks about that confession. I forget what it says, but if you don't speak with your mouth and share it, then there's a verse that says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation." So you're not going to be ashamed. If you really believe, that's what you believe. You're going to have to speak it, because you're going to also believe in heaven and hell. If you believe in Christ, you believe in death. You believe that he is the victor over death for the next life. And so there's a natural compassion there, because God says he created all of those, and faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, and we're supposed to share with people. So you don't have to have lived the perfect life to share with people. And if you're struggling still with sin as a Christian, if you're already a Christian, just keep working through it. But that doesn't mean that you have to be a mutant. Samson struggled with sin. He looked for love in all the wrong places. He fell for the wrong woman. That's similar to me. I've always fallen for I won't say I've fallen for the wrong women. I've also been blocked by a lot of people who, there's women that I have liked who I thought were being bullied and, in a sense, enslaved by certain cultures. And I thought we probably could have got along real good, but they were just being used by their people, and they let me talk a little bit, and then they wouldn't give me a chance to speak. But I kind of liked people who were in the real world instead of in what I think our society has is a superficial bubble of it's called, and they call it white. What do they call it? White privilege. I think there's a white privilege. I think that black people have white privilege too. It's called drug-free zones. If you live in a drug-free area, you've not been affected by the drugs, and then some of the crime and stealing and getting your name ruined around some of that stuff, then you have privilege. And if you don't live in the areas where you're from, not dodging bullets and everything else, but especially then you don't have the privilege as much. But if you have, because people are always trying to threaten you, steal from you, and make sure you're not snitching on them or whatever, this and that. And you can't be on the side of the police. There's that side of society, but it comes from the drug culture. And that's a sabotage law. So I really think there is a privilege that seems apparent. And they've made up this fake white privilege thing. But it's not that. There's a privilege too in promoting and being protected by the Ten Commandments. Basically, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor, and having higher standards. So there's a really high standard, though, even higher than what the Bible says. Well, I mean, it's good to have it's okay to have high standards, but people in the drug-free sides of society have really high standards a lot of times, and especially in the religious culture. And so they're a little bit delusional and thinking that everybody's supposed to live exactly the way they live. And they've been tricked into thinking that that drugs are of the devil, that alcohol is of the devil and all that, but God created that. And so I guess here's another point I wanted to say that I had thought of, is that, and then they act like stuff like, a lot of times it makes a lot of people don't end up getting married because they were taught that sex is filthy and nasty. That is sick. There's a lot of that kind of talk, and I think a lot of women say that. I don't know. Men say it. I don't know. Well, God's creation is sick and nasty and sick. Well, there are things that are gross about sensuality and intimacy, because you have slobber, spit, and all that stuff. Humans have body odors. We had all that, and you got to clean yourself, and it doesn't matter if you're with somebody or not with somebody. You got to shower at least every 3 days, or your skin will start rotting. You might get a skin infection or something. So, and it could even happen if you don't shower in 2 days. You get rashes. You get things like that. So those are kind of gross, but there's something romantic about life, and there's something about hormones, and there's something about being attracted to somebody, whether you like their smile, their personality. And God naturally made us to like certain physical features of the opposite sex for the most part. And so I guess when people like the same sex and all that. Sometimes that's because they have an insecurity for the opposite sex. Maybe because we've ended up calling sexual attraction sick, nasty, and gross. God doesn't call it that. He says it's loving the creation more than the creator. It's given into pleasure, being lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. He says sin is fun. It can be fun, but it only lasts for a season. So those things they're fun, but they're a sin. You're supposed to, and you can cause anger too, and jealousies and all that. And there's dangers in sleeping around and all those kind of things, because people get jealous, people get angry, people do that before they know each other well enough, and then they find out that they don't get along, and then it's still a hard breakup, because even though you don't have much in common or you don't get along well, you still have an emotional, once you're into a relationship with somebody prematurely, in a sense, you already have an emotional attachment, even if you don't have anything in common. So it's not about it being sick and nasty, and I get tired I've heard a lot of that stuff, and I'm like, I don't even want to be around people. If they think physical attraction is sick and nasty, well, to me, they look sick and nasty too, because I don't like hearing that talk, and that all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't want to live in a world that thinks that way, around people that think that way. I don't want to be around that in a relationship with somebody that thinks that way. I just, be a little more easygoing than that, right? So, but yeah, I'm a person I like to wash my hands all the time, and I carry hand sanitizer in my pocket, and I'm pretty picky about germs and everything else. But I've been in relationships before, and when you hold hands and stuff, you don't worry about that all the time. That person feels clean to you because that's the person who is for you, and you're for them. And you're comfortable with each other, but it's not like you pick your nose and hold hands without washing your hands. Anyway, so so people get caught up and they get isolated. They isolate themselves and think they're better than everybody else, in a sense, that their standard is better than everybody else. But then they have to live by the same standard, and they think everything's sick and nasty and filthy and all this kind of stuff. And they raise the standard, and they've stressed themselves out, and they become busybodies. Human beings have all kinds of hang-ups we get into. We get busybodies trying to impress everybody else because we're the ones that set a standard. We expect everybody to live by, like a soldier and all this stuff. And you can't drink beer. You can't drink coffee. You can't do that. And I think I like the high standard of trying to stay off coffees, trying to stay off beer, trying to stay off sugar, I like to always challenge myself to do that. And when I've done it, I feel better than normal. But it's okay to do the coffee and stuff here and there. And, anyhow, so, anyway, where do I want to go with this? I'll take a pause. So let's go to the topic of the video. Who do I think I am? Well, I don't know. I've been through a lot. I've studied a lot of things in life outside of the box. I feel like I'm a philosopher naturally. I've always been that way, even before I was saved. Well, I don't know if I can remember that back that far, but I was saved a long time ago. I've made some bad decisions when I was younger that I think have affected me the rest of my life somewhat. That just had me insecure. I thought I made a mistake that people can't forgive or whatever. I can't get over. I don't fit in with everybody else. There's 2 mistakes I had made like that, I guess. But I come from a side of society that has a lot of rules. And so I understand the drug side of society somewhat, and I understand the drug-free side of society. So that's the 2 biggest divides in society we have that we never talk about. We talk about gay rights. We talk about against abortion. We talk about pro-life, pro-abortion. We talk about all kinds of different things. But I think the biggest divide in society is the drug-free side of society and versus the areas affected by drugs. And I think there's a sabotage law involved with that. And so there's a lot of murderings and stuff allowed to happen within the side of society that is affected by drugs. And so the drug-free side of society falls for blaming that all on drugs. And it's not drugs that cause people to murder. It's greed. It's people who want money. It's more about money. People want being after money, and then they're about power. They like getting people. Some people like getting people on a drug or a bad drug just to have an excuse to hurt them or something because they acted like a fool on it. And so they like making a fool out of people and actually hurting people over that or being able to steal their money. Mostly it's for stealing people's money, right? And so, but it's a big trick because you can have legalized trees, leaves, and teas. And then you don't have people getting so dizzy that they don't know what they're doing. Then you can have people buying stuff legal in that form, which has natural appetite suppressants. It should still be limited, and you should still teach abstinence. But I'm just saying there's a big divide in society, and when people are promoting fatherlessness and making laws that support fatherlessness, that promote it. On the Democrat side, they do that. And then they're wanting to kill babies to help the pimps and the drug cartel. I'm saying that's all connected. They can do all that because there's such a big side of society that's always being robbed and always having to worry about being harmed and everything if you don't comply with the gangs and stuff that deal out there. And if they don't see you smoking and this and that, they think you're police and that you're in danger a lot of times. And it shouldn't be that way. They're the ones, they think you're crazy. And then they're going to threaten your life because they're paranoid, because they're dealing and they see somebody that's not doing the same thing. And so it gets that way, especially in homeless shelters and things. You're not allowed to speak politics or religion, or you're in danger. That's all Democrat gangs, basically, threatening people. And so that's why I see them as connected. The Democrat Party is running the drug cartel partly, and part of it. But anyway, so who do I think I am? I know all that stuff. I know both cultures, and I think I'm not wrong for that. Most of the Christian side, religious side of cultures nowadays, they would judge me for knowing these people. But I view America as a free land, and I've walked through ghettos. I've walked here and there, and I've had police stop me back in the 90s, and they'll say, oh, "There's nothing here but drugs and this." And I said once to a police, I said, "Well, now there is. There's something here besides drugs. I'm here. It's a free country, isn't it? I can walk through here, right?" And so my view, but most of the time it was gangs that would try to stop me from walking through. If you don't have money, white boy, get out of here, right? Don't come through here if you ain't got no money. And so I was told that white people are racist. And then I'm hearing that all the time. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess they're being racist. They're racist. What? They're always being racist. They don't want to be friendly and say, hello, how you doing? Nothing, but I'm like, I tell them, look, I've told them a few times, different people like that. This is a public sidewalk. I can walk up the public sidewalk if I want to. Now, in some places, I don't just say that anywhere because you can get hit over the head for saying that. But that's what I mind my business and walk through a lot of times, stay silent and try not to I've been in places where if you look back, they're yelling at you and you look back and they think you're scared. So you have to look straight ahead. They think you're scared, they're going to go after you. It used to be that way in some places. And then, but you have to look to make sure they're not coming after you too. You kind of look in the side of your eye sometimes. Okay, I've been in places like that. And I think that, I wanted to know people in situations like that who were real in the real world. I thought that's the real world in a sense. Because I've seen so many people in the drug-free side of society who are way too judgmental, way too into stereotyping, couldn't have a good conversation, couldn't have a Christian conversation. It's like they do it in church and they don't do it anywhere else. It's like, that's weird to talk about Jesus outside of church. That kind of stuff, because they're so inflated with their safety and protection and peace and quiet and doing what they want because they live on a side of society that's protected. It's protected from, well, that, frankly, barbarianism, we'll say. I was going to say craziness, but barbarianism. And so there is a difference, though, even though these people are on the good side of society, in a sense, are snobbish, real picky about, okay, he didn't dot his I and cross his T, and we'll shun him a little bit, little stuff like that. And then or they get mad about a scratch on a car or spilled milk. And I'm thinking, okay, well, people in the drug-free side of society, or the beat up, in a sense, side of society, they some of them have to think more like I do than like these people. And so don't fit in either side. I mean, who do I think I am? I think though that I'm mainly, here's what I think about myself, and I got to close out. But what I think about myself most of the time is I don't know what I'm going to think about myself because I've always been rebuilding a lot. Been through a pretty rough life, and uh, and I've made a lot of bad decisions. Not on a daily basis, but I've made bad decisions periodically that are pretty devastating. It's almost as bad as being a gambler, right? So it's kind of like, I guess I have gambled, trying to find friends in all the wrong places, in a sense. I'm the one that got nervous or didn't know how to handle a situation, and then I implode or something, and then I hang around, maybe don't talk to the person I want to talk to, and then I'm stuck dealing with the bullies or whatever, having to appease the bullies and just make peace with bullies, and then move on. So that's happened periodically in my life, but I don't regret it in some ways. I regret when I've imploded. If I decided to drink or something at those times and not stay sober, I regret that, and then how I would behave after that. But as far as me trying to get to know people and trying to have a conversation and treat them like human beings and everything like that, I don't regret that. I like what I've learned. I enjoy the fact that I've learned different cultures, all right? Despite finding out that it's not true that white people are racist. It's true that most black people in those areas are racist. I don't know if it's just racist, though. It's just they're taught to hustle, too. That's their job. A lot of them are so trained in it, they think. There's people I've met in certain places in bigger cities, I guess, maybe even some in smaller cities, that believe they'll look at me like I'm lazy because I won't steal. You need to do a hustle. You got to swindle people. You got to, threaten people for money or something. You need to get to work, man. They'll call you lazy. They actually think that's a wholesome job, So that's how much the drug delusions have created of a segregation to make people think that's kosher to steal for a living. And people literally think it's kosher to steal for a living because all we've ever talked about is how bad drug addicts are. And you don't even talk about drug dealers dealing without a license, dealers stealing from the addicts. They think addicts spend all their money on drugs, but the dealing group steals their money. If they spent all their money on drugs, they'd be dead in the first 30 minutes. Overdose. I mean, come on. If they spent that much money on it, drugs don't cost that much. But it costs when you have to keep going back to it. It costs when their dealing group, sometimes it is addict dealers who are stealing from, they get the addicts in their dealing group, which is part of a gang usually, because they're able to get the real stuff and they'll steal from another addict. And so but that's part of it because we've allowed that, and we call drugs of the devil instead of realizing God made the natural plants and you can just make a tea instead of put the strongest forms, concentrated forms out in the street. Duh. And so, but nobody wants to talk about that in the drug-free side of society because they think it's too risky. And so it looks risky because with marijuana, they've made marijuana legal and in a lot of places. And then people are still not doing well because they put a trick there. You got to buy a $400 license to be able to, something like that. That's $300 to $500, I think, per year, in order to be allowed to use the legal marijuana. And people they're like, okay, it's legalized. I'll just get mine from the street on the cheap. And if I fail a drug test, it doesn't matter because it's legal now. So, of course, you don't have the license. I don't know how, there's more leniency because of that, but they still get it from the street, which might have fentanyl or something else, or you're dealing with people who could get in trouble. You're paranoid. They might put you in a place where you're in trouble for smoking it. You don't have the license, so you can be in trouble. There's paranoia that comes with that. There's a lot of games that go around that because people use intimidation to set people up. But we're out of time. And but I wanted to say that, so if they legalized it right, though, and didn't make you pay all that stuff, people should be taught not just to smoke it, but to drink the tea. 2 leaves in a tea. That's not very strong. It won't be stronger than coffee, right? So especially like if they had the coca leaf, I say it wouldn't be stronger than coffee. Marijuana is a downer, not an upper. So that's different. I think an upper is better than a downer because you can't drive with a downer. Like caffeine, you can. I got to go.